John had never imagined this day would come. A mission to explore an alien planet turned into something far more dangerous than he could have ever predicted. He had expected a peaceful meeting with a strange new species, the VHLara. Instead, he found himself standing in front of their leader, Queen Jyra, in the heart of their massive, ancient city. The walls of the Grand Hall stretched high above, shimmering with alien carvings and symbols, some of which John could barely make sense of. It was an overwhelming sight, but he had a job to do. John wasn't afraid. He had faced danger before. But this was something new. Jyra stood before him, towering and intimidating. She was a fearsome sight, her green skin glistening under the hall's lights, eyes glowing with a mixture of curiosity and condescension. She was beautiful in an alien way, her presence commanding and powerful. She was unlike any leader John had seen before, proud, unyielding, and filled with arrogance. She had heard the stories about humans. She had heard how we were seen as weak, fragile, and not worthy of much attention. She had heard the rumors, and she believed them. "I've heard much about you." "Human," Jyra said, her voice smooth and cold, echoing through the massive hall. "The so-called warriors of your kind. Tell me, what are you truly capable of?" John stood tall, meeting her gaze. He knew this was a test. Test of strength, yes, but also of his mind, of his humanity. He was determined not to back down, no matter how much her arrogance tried to shake his confidence. "I'm capable of a lot," John said, his voice steady, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "We're not the weak creatures you think. We are." Jyra tilted her head slightly, her lips curling into a mocking smile. She waved a hand toward John, dismissing him as if he were little more than an annoyance. "A blade," she mused aloud, glancing at the small weapon at his side. "Is that a blade or a toothpick?" She laughed, the sound echoing in the hall, almost mocking. John felt his anger rise, but he kept it in check. Couldn't afford to let her see that she had gotten to him. Instead, he calmly placed his hand on the blade. "It's a blade," he said quietly, his voice carrying no hint of hesitation. "And it's enough." The Queen's laughter continued for a moment longer, before she stopped abruptly, her eyes narrowing. "I see. Perhaps you'll show me what it can do. After all, you must have something impressive if you've come all the way to my home." John said nothing. He didn't need to prove himself to her with words. He was here to show her that humanity was not to be underestimated. He wasn't going to allow her mockery to pass without consequence. But how? How could he make her understand the power of his people, of humanity, with nothing more than a simple blade? Jyra gestured for him to follow. She led him to a circular arena, where other VHLara stood in the shadows, watching with interest. They were waiting. Queen turned back to John, her smile still present but no longer as certain as before. "Show me, human," she commanded. "Show me the strength you believe you possess." John glanced around the arena. The crowd was silent, watching with expectant eyes. He knew that this moment, this test, could change everything. He could prove that humanity was not as weak as the galaxy thought, or he could fail and confirm the VHLR's worst assumptions. John stepped forward into the center of the arena. He unsheathed his blade slowly, the familiar weight of it comforting in his hand. He wasn't a master swordsman. He had trained, but he wasn't a warrior by any definition. He was a soldier. He wasn't here to show off skill with a blade, but something far more important, the will to fight for what was right. Jyra watched him carefully, her eyes cold, but filled with curiosity. She didn't understand why this human stood with such confidence, armed with nothing but a simple blade. She expected him to fall quickly. She expected him to fail. But she had underestimated him, as she was about to find out. Without warning, Jyra attacked. She was fast, and her weapon was enormous, a massive, deadly blade that shimmered with energy. She moved quickly, her speed almost too fast for the human eye to follow. John barely had time to react, dodging to the side as Jyra's blade came, crashing down where he had stood just moments before. The ground trembled with the force of her strike, but John remained calm. He had trained for this. He moved swiftly, using his smaller blade to deflect her next attack, feeling the force of the blow rattle his arm. He stepped back, his mind working quickly to analyze her every movement. He couldn't match her strength, but he could match her wit. As Gira moved again, he saw an opening. Without hesitation, he lunged, using his blade to strike at her side. But she was too fast, and the blow only grazed her armor. She hissed in frustration and swung again, but John ducked just in time, his mind racing. He couldn't win on power alone. He had to use his intelligence, his adaptability. That was humanity's strength. He found his footing, moving in a way that surprised the queen. Every step he took was calculated, every move purposeful. He wasn't just fighting with his blade, he was fighting with his mind, using everything he had to outthink his opponent. Gira's eyes narrowed, her amusement fading as she realized this human was not like the others. He was different. His resolve, his adaptability were things she had not expected, she had underestimated. Him, and now, she was starting to understand just how wrong she was. John's heart raced, but he kept his focus. He wasn't going to let her win, not today. The battle continued, the air thick with tension. Queen Gira's movements were a blur of speed and strength, and John found himself constantly on the defensive. He was faster than she had expected, his body reacting quickly to every move she made. But her blade was massive. Each swing felt like it could break him in two. The ground beneath them trembled as Gira's weapon slammed into the earth. She wasn't holding back, clearly underestimating John's ability to endure. The crowd of Vialara watched intently, their eyes flicking back and forth between the two combatants. John could see the doubt beginning to grow in their faces. They saw him dodge yet another of the queen's heavy strikes. Gira growled, frustrated by John's persistence. She swung again, her blade crackling with energy as it sliced through the air. This time, she aimed for his legs, hoping to disable him. John barely managed to jump out of the way, the heat of her blade grazing his side. His skin burned from the near miss, but he didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. Gira smiled, clearly enjoying the fight now. She underestimated the human. Again, he was strong, stronger than she thought. But he wasn't going to win this battle with his strength alone. John's mind raced. He needed to come up with a new strategy. If he kept dodging, eventually the queen would catch him. If he tried to overpower her, he would lose. He had to outsmart her. It was the one thing humans did better than any other species. Gira came. At him again, this time faster than before, her blade slicing the air with a deadly hum. John sidestepped the strike just in time, narrowly missing a direct hit. He could feel his muscles aching from the constant movement, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. Then it came to him. He remembered the stories of how humans had once been. The underdogs of the galaxy, how their ingenuity had been their greatest weapon. It wasn't about brute strength. It was about using what you had. He wasn't going to beat the queen with his blade, but maybe he could beat her with his mind. With a sudden movement, John dropped to the ground, rolling away from Gira's next strike. He quickly stood up and grabbed a large piece of debris from the broken arena floor, tossing it toward her face. It wasn't much, just a distraction, but it worked. Gira hesitated for just a moment, her eyes shifting toward the flying object. It was all John needed. He launched himself forward, using his speed to close the gap between them. He moved around, her staying just out of range of her massive blade. As he passed behind her, he aimed a quick strike with his own blade, cutting the edge of her armor. It wasn't a fatal blow, but it was a reminder that he wasn't to be taken lightly. Gira spun around, her eyes flashing with anger. This human was a challenge, something she hadn't expected. She had thought he was just another weak creature, easy to defeat. But now, she wasn't so sure. John stood his ground, his breath coming in heavy gasps. The pain in his side was sharp, but he ignored it. He wasn't about to give up. Not now. Not after everything he had fought for. Gira's eyes narrowed as she stared at him. "You're stronger than I thought, human," she said, her voice low and filled with respect. "But this battle is far from over." John didn't reply. He didn't need to. The moment of quiet respect between them spoke volumes. He knew that this wasn't just about winning the fight. It was about proving something far greater. Proving that humans were capable of standing up against the galaxy's mightiest warriors. The queen charged again, her blade raised high. John braced himself, waiting for the perfect moment. Watched. Her every movement, her muscles flexing as she prepared to strike. And then, just as she brought her blade down, John moved. He stepped to the side, using her own momentum against her. With a swift move, he ducked under her swing, his blade flashing, out in a quick, precise strike. This time, he hit. The blade glanced off her armor, leaving a deep cut along her side. Gira's eyes widened, a hiss of surprise escaping her lips. She had never thought a human could land a blow like that. Gira stepped back, her expression shifting from anger to something else, something John hadn't seen in her before. It was respect, recognition that he wasn't just a weak human, was a warrior in his own right. "You are a fool to think you can defeat me, human," she growled. But there was no malice in her words, only admiration for the fight he had. Given she had expected him to break, instead, he had surprised her. He had shown her the strength that lay within humanity. John stood tall, holding his blade steady. "I don't need to defeat you," he said, his voice calm but filled with determination. "I just need you to understand that we're not as weak as you think." Gira studied him for a long moment, her eyes calculating. She could see it now, the resilience, the adaptability, the intelligence. These were the things that made humans dangerous. Not the size of their weapons, not their physical strength. It was their minds. It's their will to fight, to survive. With a sudden movement, Gira dropped her blade, signaling the end of the fight. The crowd of Via Talara went silent, watching as their queen acknowledged her defeat. She had not won this time, and she knew it. The human had shown her something she had never expected. John's heart raced, but he didn't lower his weapon. He wasn't sure what would happen next. Would she attack again? Would she kill him for daring to challenge her? But Gira didn't do either of those things. Instead, she stepped forward, her eyes meeting his. "You've proven yourself, human," she said, her voice softer now. "You've earned my respect." John nodded slowly. It was a small victory, but it was enough. It shown Gira, and perhaps even the entire galaxy, that humanity was not to be underestimated. He wasn't the strongest, he wasn't the fastest, but he had something far more important: the will to fight, the intelligence to survive, and the heart to never give up. The battle had ended, but the atmosphere in the arena was still charged with energy. The VHLR crowd was silent, their eyes fixed on the two figures standing in the center. Queen Gira had dropped her massive weapon, conceding the fight. The respect in her eyes was clear. John had shown her something that no one else had. The humans, even with their simple tools and basic strength, could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's mightiest. John stood still, his breathing heavy, his side still aching from the cuts, but he didn't let it show. His gaze remained steady, locked onto the alien queen before him. She was strong. She was a queen, the leader of her people. But she had underestimated him. She had underestimated humanity. Gira took a step forward. Her eyes no longer filled with mockery, but with something deeper: respect. "You surprised?" "Me, human," she said, her voice low but powerful. "I thought your kind was weak, helpless. But now, I see differently." There was no need to. He had already shown her everything that mattered. The fight wasn't just about strength. It was about determination, about resilience, and about the will to survive. And humanity had that in spades. "You think you've won?" Gira continued, her voice tinged with a hint of amusement. "Perhaps, but this is only the beginning, human. The galaxy doesn't bend so easily, and neither will I." John remained silent, the weight of her words settling in his mind. The fight was over, yes, but the challenge had just begun. The respect he had earned from Gira was important, but it was only the first step. The VHLara were a powerful species, and their queen was not one to be easily swayed. He had won her respect in battle, but that didn't mean she would bow to him. Or to humanity. "You've done well," Gira said, after a long pause, her gaze softening. "But remember, this is my world. My people, and we do things our way." She turned and began to walk back toward her throne, her guards falling into line behind her. John followed her with his eyes, his mind already working. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. He had to figure out what Jira's words meant. The VHLR were powerful, and they weren't going to just accept humanity's rise without a fight. But he had shown them that humans weren't as weak as they thought, and that was something. As Gyra seated herself on her throne, she motioned for John to approach. "Come," she said, her voice now more neutral, no longer mocking, but more curious. "Let us speak as equals now." John hesitated for a moment, the words echoing in his mind. Speak as equals. It was a strange thought, but not an unwelcome one. Perhaps this was his chance to finally make the Queen see that humanity was more than just a footnote in the galaxy's history. He walked forward slowly, taking a knee before her. It wasn't out of submission, but respect. This was Gyra's world, her domain. And he needed to show her that he understood that, even if he didn't agree with everything she stood for. "Your people are strong," John said, his voice steady but filled with sincerity. "I'm not here to challenge your strength. I'm here to show you that we, too, have power. The power to fight, to survive, the power to adapt." Gyra raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued by his words. "Adapt," she repeated softly. "You think that will be enough to survive in a galaxy like this?" "It's not just about survival," John replied. "It's about progress. We're not the strongest species, but we're quick to learn. We don't give up. We fight for what matters, and we learn from our mistakes." Gyra leaned forward slightly, her expression softening. "That much I can see," she admitted. "You are different from the others, but don't think that because you've won one battle, you've won the war." John nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. One victory did not mean humanity would conquer the galaxy, but it was a start. In the grand scheme of things, sometimes that's all it takes. "I know this isn't over," John said, "but I also know that humanity won't be ignored. Not anymore. We've come too far to be dismissed as weak." Gyra studied him for a moment, her gaze unwavering. "I see now that you believe in your people, in your strength. Perhaps I have been wrong about you." She stood up, signaling the end of their conversation. "You've proven yourself human, not just in battle, but in your words. I will consider what you've said." John didn't respond immediately. There was no need. He had made his point. He had earned her respect, and for now that was enough. As he turned to leave the throne room, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. He had come here expecting a simple mission to explore, to learn. But what he had found was something far greater. He had found a challenge, a chance to show the galaxy what humanity was capable of. The fight wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time, John felt confident. He had shown the Queen and the rest of the VHLR that humans were a force to be reckoned with. They weren't just weak creatures, fighting for survival. They were strong, capable, and ready to take their place in the galaxy. As he walked back through the halls, John couldn't help but feel a sense of pride swelling inside him. He had done it. He had proven humanity's worth. And now he would fight for their place in the stars, no matter what came next. John had earned Jira's respect, but that didn't mean everything was over. In fact, it was just the beginning. As he walked away from the throne room, a sense of determination filled him. He had shown the Queen that humanity was not to be underestimated, but the galaxy was vast, and there were many more challenges ahead. What he had done here was important, but it was only one battle. The war, in many ways, had just begun. He couldn't help but replay the moments in his mind, the looks of surprise on the faces of the VLR, the shift in Jira's expression as she realized that humans weren't just weak, fragile creatures. He had never been one to seek recognition, but this was different. The Queen's respect was something powerful, something he could use. It wasn't about pride anymore. It was about proving humanity's place in the galaxy. As John walked back to the small room they had given him for rest, he thought about what Gyra had said. "This is my world. My people, we do things our way." She wasn't wrong. She had built an empire on strength and power, but there was more to humanity than just strength. Humans had an unyielding spirit, a drive to learn, to grow. That, John believed, was what would ultimately make them a force to be reckoned with. Hours later, John was summoned to another meeting. He didn't know what to expect. His mind was still racing from the fight earlier and the weight of the conversation. With Gira was heavy on his mind, but he wasn't going to let it stop him. He had to keep moving forward, had to make sure humanity's future wasn't decided by the arrogance of a single alien queen. As he entered the room, Gira was waiting for him. This time her expression wasn't one of mockery or challenge. It was thoughtful, almost as if she were considering something deeply. "You came," she said, her voice calm. "I wasn't sure if you would after the battle. Most would run or bow after such a confrontation." John stood tall. "I'm not. Most people, I came here to prove something. Not just to you, but to my people and to the rest of the galaxy." Gira nodded slowly as if she were processing his words. "I see. I've thought about what you said, about humanity. You've shown me that you're not just weaklings as we once thought." She paused, looking directly at him. "But that doesn't mean you've won. Not yet." John felt his pulse quicken. "I didn't expect to win," he replied. "But I've shown you that we can fight, that we can survive. If we have to, we'll fight again." Gira looked at him for a moment, as if studying him. Then, with a sudden motion, she stood up from her throne and walked over to a table nearby. She lifted a small device and handed it to him. "I've decided to give you something, a gift of sorts. Something that will show you that I respect your strength." John looked down at the device in his hand. It was small, circular, and looked like nothing more than a piece of advanced technology. But something about it felt important. Something about it told him that this wasn't just a simple token. "What is this?" he asked. His curiosity piqued. Gira smiled, a small knowing smile. "It's a map of the galaxy. One that leads to something you've never seen before. Something your people might find useful." John frowned, confusion evident on his face. "A map to what?" Gira's smile widened. "You'll see. But you must understand this. It's not just about power. It's about knowledge, understanding. You've already shown you have the strength. Now it's time for you to show you have the wisdom." John took the map and studied it closely. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. The stars and planets were arranged in a way that didn't quite make sense, as if they were part of a different system entirely. He couldn't figure it out, but he knew one thing for sure. This was important. This was a new challenge. One that could lead humanity to something greater than they had ever imagined. "I don't understand," John said, looking back at Gira. "What does this mean? Why are you giving me this?" Gira's expression softened. "Because human, I've realized something. You've proven that you're not as weak as we once thought. You've earned something. This map leads to a place that could give you and your people the knowledge and resources you need to thrive in this galaxy. But there's a catch." John raised an eyebrow. "What kind of catch?" Gira's gaze grew cold again. "Is dangerous. The beings who control this knowledge won't just give it to anyone. They will test you. They will challenge you. And not everyone who tries to take this path will survive." John's heart raced as he processed her words. A dangerous journey, a chance for knowledge, power, and survival. It sounded too good to be true, but John didn't hesitate. He knew what he had to do. "I'll do it. I'll take the challenge. Humanity can't sit back anymore. We have to push forward." Gira nodded approvingly. "Good. I expected no less from you. But remember this, human. The galaxy is vast, and it is filled with dangers beyond your comprehension. You are not alone in this quest. Others will seek what you seek. They may not have your best interests at heart." "I know," John said, looking at the map once more. "But that won't stop us." Gira stepped back and watched him, her expression unreadable. "I hope you're right. But remember, humanity's survival isn't just about fighting. It's about what you can learn, what you can discover. Strength is important, but knowledge is power." John nodded, tucking the map into his pocket. "I understand. We'll find a way." With that, Gira turned and walked back to her throne, her eyes fixed on the human soldier before her. She had given him the chance to prove himself. And now she was watching him closely, waiting to see if humanity would rise to the challenge. John knew this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be filled with unknown dangers, but he wasn't afraid. The galaxy had no idea what it was about to face. Humanity was coming, and they were ready. John stood in the middle of the vast alien city, his heart pounding in his chest as he looked at the map Shiera had given him. The device in his hand hummed softly, showing a strange, twisting path across the galaxy that no human had ever traveled before. It wasn't just a map to a distant location. It was a map to something more, something that could change humanity's future forever. Gira's words echoed in his mind. The path is dangerous. Just give it to anyone. They will test you. They will challenge you. John knew she wasn't exaggerating, so every word had been carefully chosen. This was no ordinary journey. It was a test of everything humanity stood for: strength, intelligence, and the will to survive. He had already proven his worth in the eyes of the VHLR Queen. He had earned her respect. But the real test was yet to come. He had to lead humanity into the unknown, into a galaxy full of dangers, challenges, and rivals. The stakes were high, and John knew that failure wasn't an option. He turned around, heading toward the shuttle that would take him back to the human fleet. It wasn't just a personal journey anymore. This was about humanity's place in the galaxy. He had seen the way the VHLR viewed his people weak and insignificant. But he knew that the strength of humanity was not in their weapons or their size. It was in their ability to adapt, to learn, to fight when they had no choice. As John walked toward the shuttle, his mind raced. What awaited him out there? What would he find on this path? Gira had warned him of the dangers, but what exactly did she mean? Who were these mysterious beings who controlled the knowledge he sought? And most importantly, who else would be out there, hunting for the same power? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind him. He turned quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the hilt of his blade. But it wasn't a threat that stood before him. It was a woman. Dressed in the same armor as the VLR soldiers, her face hidden behind a dark mask. She was tall and imposing, an air of authority that made John instinctively stand straighter. "You are leaving," the woman said, her voice cold and distant. "The Queen has given you a map, but she hasn't given you the full story." Jigan narrowed his eyes. "What do you mean?" The woman took a step closer, her eyes glinting with an unreadable expression. "The map leads to something ancient, something powerful, but it also leads to a test. A trial that will prove whether humanity is truly worthy of the power you seek." John didn't speak immediately. He could feel the weight of her words, and the doubt that started to creep into his mind. He had been so focused on the map, on the journey ahead, he hadn't stopped to consider the real cost of what he was about to undertake. What if humanity wasn't ready for this? What if he wasn't ready? "Queen warned me," John said, his voice steady. "But I'm ready. My people are ready." The woman studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Perhaps you are. Be careful. The path is not as simple as it seems. There are many who would see you fail. There are those who will do anything to stop you." John's pulse quickened. The woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she stepped back, her gaze lingering on him for a moment longer. "You will know when the time comes," she said cryptically. "But remember this, you are not alone. Humanity is not alone.
Ow.
There are allies out there. Seek them." With that, she turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving John alone with his thoughts. He was shaken, but not deterred. The journey ahead was uncertain, but that didn't mean he would turn back. If anything, the warning only made him more determined. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for the future of humanity. The shuttle was waiting for him, and he boarded without another word. As the doors closed behind him, John looked out the window at the city of the VHLara, a reminder of the challenges that lay ahead. The unknowns, the dangers, and the enemies who would do anything to stop him. But John wasn't afraid. He had come this far. He had earned the respect of a queen, proven his worth on a battlefield that no one had thought he could survive. And now, he was going to prove that humanity's place in the galaxy was secure. He would find the answers that Gyra had promised. He would face the tests that awaited him. As the shuttle left the VHLR city behind, John glanced at the map again. The path twisted across the stars, leading to an unknown world. Going to be dangerous, but he was ready for whatever lay ahead. The journey would not be easy, but it was one he had to take. Humanity had come a long way, but it had only just begun. The galaxy was vast, filled with wonders and dangers alike. And John, a simple human soldier, was going to show the galaxy that no matter how small or insignificant humans might seem, they had a place in this vast universe. The journey ahead would be full of challenges, but John was determined to face them head-on. He had the strength, the intelligence, and the will to see it through. No matter what, he would prove that humanity was not weak. They were ready to rise to the occasion. The shuttle sped toward the unknown, carrying John closer to his destiny and humanity's future in the galaxy. The path would be long, but John was ready. The journey had just begun. The shuttle was silent as it sped through the vast emptiness of space. John sat in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the map in front of him, the strange symbols and paths leading him deeper into the unknown. He had always known that humanity's future lay among the stars, but now, with this new mission, he felt the weight of it more than ever. Gira had given him the key to something greater, but it came with a price. She had warned him that the path was dangerous, and he knew she wasn't joking. There was something out there, something that would challenge him in ways he couldn't yet understand. But that was the purpose of this journey, wasn't it? To test humanity, to prove that they had what it took to survive and thrive in a galaxy full of powerful beings and unknown forces. John could feel the tension in the pit of his stomach, but he wasn't about to back down. He wasn't going to let fear stop him. Humanity's place in the galaxy was up to him now. The VHLR had underestimated them, and he had every intention of proving them wrong. The map led to a distant star system, one that didn't appear on any human charts. According to the ancient data from the VHLR, it was a place where no one had dared to go, a world filled with secrets, guarded by beings who would test anyone brave enough to seek it out. John didn't know what to expect, but he knew this was the chance humanity had been waiting for. This could be the turning point in their history. The shuttle's engines hummed steadily as it neared the system. Through the viewports, John could see the cluster of stars growing closer. It wasn't like anything he had seen before. The stars here seemed to have a strange glow to them, almost as if they were alive. And within this glowing field, a single planet orbited, distant yet powerful, surface hidden by thick clouds of dust and gas. As the shuttle approached, John felt a sense of awe wash over him. This was it. The place that Zira had warned him about. It's a place where the true challenge awaited. He wasn't sure what lay beneath those clouds, but he was ready to face whatever it was. He activated the CUM system and sent a signal back to Earth, letting them know he had arrived. There was no immediate response. The communication satellites that linked the far reaches of space to Earth were few and far between. But John wasn't worried. This was a solo mission, and he had everything he needed to succeed. He would complete the journey, whether or not Earth was watching. The shuttle entered the planet's atmosphere with a sudden jolt, turbulence making the controls a little more difficult to manage. John gripped the flight stick tightly, focusing on the path ahead. The clouds were thick, swirling like a storm, making it impossible to see anything below. But he trusted his instruments and knew that he had to press on. The shuttle descended, lower and lower, cutting through the clouds. The planet's surface finally came into view, and what John saw made his breath catch in his throat. The planet was covered in jagged, rocky mountains, deep valleys, and ancient ruins. The surface seemed barren and desolate, yet there was something unsettling about it. It was as though the very land itself had a story to tell, one that no one had ever heard. John brought the shuttle in for a soft landing, the dust rising from the ground as he set down on a flat area between two towering mountain ranges. The air outside the shuttle was thin, cold, and dry, but John was prepared. He sealed the shuttle behind him, grabbing his gear and weapon before stepping out into the unknown. As soon as he stepped onto the surface, he felt a strange vibration beneath his feet. It was subtle, but it was there. The ground seemed to hum with energy, and for a moment, John wondered if this was all part of the test Gira had warned him about. He looked around, scanning the rocky terrain for any sign of life, but there was nothing. No animals, no vegetation, just rocks and dust. He checked the map again, finding his destination marked ahead. It was a large structure, built into the side of one of the mountains. There was no sign of what it was, but the ancient designs on the map suggested it was something important, something powerful. It was the only place on this planet that seemed to hold any significance. John began walking toward the structure, his boots crunching against the dust. The further he went, the more the hum beneath his feet seemed to grow. It was as though the entire planet was alive, as if it were watching him. The feeling was unsettling, but John refused to let it shake him. He had come this far, couldn't turn back now. After several hours of walking, John finally reached the entrance to the mountain structure. It was a massive door, carved from solid rock and covered in strange symbols. It looked ancient, far older than anything humanity had ever seen. He examined the door closely, but there was no visible way to open it. No handle, no keyhole, just a solid wall of stone. John stepped back, thinking for a moment. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, one of the tools Gira had given him before his departure. It was a simple translator designed to decode ancient languages and unlock doors or devices that had been sealed for centuries. He activated the device, and the symbols on the door began to glow softly. The ground beneath his feet hummed again, and the door slowly began to open, revealing a dark passage beyond. The air inside was cool, and there was a faint smell of dust and decay. But there was something else too. Something that felt ... ancient. John took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness. He had no idea what he would find inside, but he was ready. This was the challenge. This was the test. He moved cautiously, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade, ready for anything. The passage stretched deep into the heart of the mountain, and as he moved deeper, he began to feel a sense of unease. It was quiet, too quiet. No signs of life, no sounds. Just the hum of the planet beneath his feet. Finally, he reached the end of the passage. In front of him stood a massive chamber, its walls lined with strange, glowing symbols. In the center of the room stood an ancient pedestal, and atop it lay a small object. It was simple, no bigger than his fist, but it glowed with an eerie light. John stepped forward, his heart racing. This was it. This was the power he had come for. But as he reached out to take the object, a loud, rumbling sound echoed through the chamber. The ground beneath him shook, and the walls began to glow brighter. John's instincts kicked in. He had no idea what was happening, but he knew one thing: he was about to face the test that Gira had warned him about.